if you're trying to lead people and you're trying to drive large-scale change and transformation, if they don't trust you, you're done. And so they need to trust you, and that means trusting you as a person. And in order to trust you as a person, being authentic and being vulnerable, pretty important ingredients to gain people's trust.
Hello, my name is Pete Steinberg. This is the Leadership Shock podcast that goes along with the book Leadership Shock. And today we have a very special guest. We have Geoff Tanner, from the CEO of Simply Good Foods, and I'm going to say is sort of patient one in the authentic leadership model, the one of the inspirations of the work that ended up with the book. So we're going to be talking with Geoff about his experience as a leader and the many transitions he's gone through. So Geoff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I got to correct you, Pete. We just dropped the foods, didn't we, from Simply Good? So.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, Simply Good.
Your team at the helm there. So this is like week one of the new identity and got the new corporate logo going. And yeah, but I thought I'd pull you up on that one.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if we can get in talking about the work that you've done at Simply Good Foods today, we will. But I actually want to start because, Geoff, we've worked together for a long time, and you were the first client that made an explicit ask, where I think that you were moving to your first VP role, and your ask was, "Hey, I think I need to lead differently. Can you help me think through how it was?" And that's really where sort of the authentic leadership model came from. So how did you, what was the insight that you had that put you into that space and made you feel like you needed to do something more explicit about your leadership?
I think it is a philosophy I have in general that when you move to new situations, in this case, I think you're right. I think it was my first vice president role. That sort of somewhat cliche. What got you here may not get you there. And I've always believed that, almost philosophically, and that those moments present opportunities for a little bit of reflection, but in recognition of the need that you're going to have to do some things differently. And when you are presented with new opportunities or challenges, in this case, it was, I think, my first vice president role, recognizing that the leadership I had demonstrated to date could not be entirely relied upon to be successful in this new role. And therefore, it was a really good opportunity to take a step back and do some reflection, work with you, and examine what had worked in the past and what I might want it to be different, and what the contextual situation, how different that was. And it is something that I do. I've always done it. Do it in my personal life too. Just every time you come to a new situation, a new challenge, a new opportunity, take the time and be very intentional about evaluating what changes you're probably going to have to make.
Now, Geoff, even though this was sort of the first authentic leadership model, I still use it as an example with clients and say, look, this is where it can go. Because one of the really interesting things about your authentic leadership model was that it created some real explicit principles that you wanted to lead by, but it also created some expectations of your team. And I think in your case, maybe created some clarity for your team about the way that you led. So an example is, one of the things that's very unique about you as a leader is that you use a lot of hypotheticals. You do hypothesis thinking, which means that you can actually change your mind very quickly. And that can feel like it's like a lack of direction, but when you understand it's hypothesis testing, it works. So talk a little bit about the way you think understanding how you lead can help you lead your team?
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up, because in the role I'm in now, so first time CEO of a publicly traded company, I found it to be even more important to be clear and to have a dialogue with your team about the way you lead. Because if that expectation, those conversations are not had, can lead to confusion, frustration. And the example that you shared, uh, I think out loud. That's just, I'm programmed that way. I think in terms of hypotheses that I want to disprove or prove, and to folks, it can therefore run the risk of coming across like, my gosh, this guy's like changing his mind all the time. So sitting down and saying, this is how I am, and this is how I want you to interpret how I engage. When you take it up to a CEO level, it's even more important, because when you're the CEO, if you're thinking out loud and you're having hypotheses, people take it as direction, right? And
Right.
right, and so when I took this new job, this was identified very early on by Spencer Stewart as a strength and a real gap. And we put plans in place to the point where now I'm clear in a meeting when I'm giving direction and when I'm just debating out loud. So if that's the same issue, the risk in the role that where I was working with you on was, oh, Geoff could come across as if he's changing his mind all the time. The risk
Right.
magnified as you go up in an organization, which you could send a bunch of people running off in all sorts of different directions, when you were just like, oh, I was just thinking. So, right.
Yeah. I mean, as a CEO,
Yeah.
right, you're right. You say something
Yeah.
and people are like, oh, we need to start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fascinating that that's been part of your career over the last 20 years as a leader, that it's been something. But it also, I think, allows your team, once they understand that, to test your hypothesis, to be
Yeah.
willing to challenge you and say, well, you said that, but actually I'm not sure I agree with it. And I think that's one of your superpowers as a leader, your willingness to take that challenge to your thinking.
The only way I know to bat better than average is to have good people, have hypotheses, and then listen and seek out feedback, beat it up. No one I know in my entire career, it gets it right all the time. And so what you have to do is encourage people to push back on you. Again, that gets more of a challenge the higher you get in the organization. And I've had to work tenfold compared to when we were on the example you're referring to truly let people know, I want your pushback. A lot of people just aren't used or don't feel comfortable pushing back to the CEO. But because that is how I like to lead, that's how I think I add value by having hypotheses and seeking out feedback. Let me tell you, you got to work extra hard to create the psychologically safe space where people feel they can do that. And again, so those two things, which are, hey, there are times when I'm just thinking out loud, and I'm going to be really clear about that. And two, I want you to push back. I sincerely mean it. Are two of the things that I've had to work extra hard at, and I'm probably still not where I want to be.
Let's talk a little bit about the story that you tell in the book. So that story is about your transition to the JM Smucker company. First of all, just for the people that haven't read the book yet, just a little context about that move, but I don't want you to spoil the whole experience. So a little context about the move, and then why that was so challenging for you in terms of what you know, because you already shared that you're very intentional. You think about these changes, you think about what needs to be different, but that didn't help you in that transition. So maybe a little bit of the context of the transition so people can understand why it was challenging for you.
the context, without going into too many details, was I was a vice president, I think, of a $2.5 billion company in San Francisco that was private equity run, and we were acquired by the JM Smucker company, at the time $8 billion Midwest family run 100-year-old conservative in Orville, Ohio, and talk about a clash of cultures. I made a pretty good connection with the CEO, Mark Smucker. He offered me a job, and the job was to go to Orville. So I made the not too trodden journey from San Francisco to just outside of Cleveland, and help him transform his organization. I was the first corporate officer from the outside, I think, in the history of the company. And I went in there, and because we're all products of our environment, and the older I get, the more I appreciate that. I went in there saying, okay, move one, hire McKinsey. Move two, bring on IDEO. Let's jumpstart innovation. Let's drive the change. And was met with quite the resistance, which I talk about, and you write about in the book. And that was when I realized that maybe I had a decent toolkit on what to do, but I had not really developed my skill set on true leadership, transformational leadership, and what it takes to go on that journey. And as I think I say in the book, I was pretty sure I was going to be fired once or twice in those early days. Remember coming home, looking at the contract, and I give myself a little bit of credit. I remember saying, okay, this sucks, but I'm going to treat it as a learning experience, and I'm going to try to learn how to lead better. And that was quite the journey that I went on, to, I think, becoming much more authentic. The same person that would go home and play with my little kids at the time was the same person that showed up in the office. But it was quite the journey to get there, which we'll talk about in the book.
Yeah, I think so if you said, what are two things that you do differently as a leader now because of that experience, what would the two things be that jump to the top of your mind?
There's really no difference between the person who shows up in the office and who I am at home. Whereas it used to be, I sort of joke about this, San Francisco private equity, playful dad would get in a car and out would pop Mr. Business driving executive. And so that was, it was just, don't do that. So for example, I talk a lot about the kids. I play the piano, so I'd often play the piano on campus. I would just talk about,
if I can, Geoff, I think you're open to vulnerability, right? Like you say things like, I don't know how to do that, or I'm not good at that.
Yeah, that would have been the second, which is be my authentic self. But part of that is just be vulnerable, and it's okay to be vulnerable. In fact, it's more than okay to be vulnerable, and to say when you don't know things, to say that you're frustrated, to sort of be human, right? To wrap it up. And if you're trying to lead people and you're trying to drive large-scale change and transformation, if they don't trust you, you're done. And so they need to trust you, and that means trusting you as a person. And in order to trust you as a person, being authentic and being vulnerable, pretty important ingredients to gain people's trust.
Geoff, when we were working together, and it gets this idea of being authentic, I think, you had this aspiration of really creating a a company that people love to work for, that really delights the customer and really helps the lives of the customer. Is that that was 20 years ago? Is that purpose still the same? Has it changed?
I think, yeah. I mean, the company's changed. The words on the purpose statement that you and I wrote together for the company I'm at now, they've changed. What hasn't changed is, I think, people come to work first and foremost to gain economic security for themselves and their families, and they come to work also because they want to make a difference and they want to do something positive. And if you can tap into that and you can create that opportunity for folks, I think you'll get better people doing better work, and it will last a lot longer. That has always been at the forefront of how I like to lead. Yes, we're here to, in our case, drive our stock price, deliver for our shareholders. But in order to get the best out of my team, there has to be more than that.
Well, here you are now, the CEO of a publicly traded company. Let's first talk, because I want to talk a little bit about what you want to do at Simply Good. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the transition, which I guess you're still in. You're less than a year in the role, right? But what were some of the things that have surprised you about becoming the CEO for the first time?
There's sort of the obvious, right? So I sometimes joke, the last time, Pete, this much of the job was new, I think I was paid 30,000 New Zealand dollars. Okay. Right. So, and no one cared what I said, right. And everyone said it to me, but nothing can prepare you for certainly a public company CEO job where probably half of it is new. So,
right.
Yes, I've worked with boards of directors before, but I've never had to run a board. Yes, I have spoke with analysts that covered our stock, but I've never been on an earnings call before. Yes, I've had involvement in parts of an organization that I wasn't leading, but not the sort of involvement you need to have as a CEO. So half the job is pretty much new, and that's sort of an obvious change. I think what the other element that's new is the buck really does stop with you. Nothing lands on my plate unless it's largely very complicated or very important. And people do look to you to have the answer. And it's a mindset shift, right? That you sort of have to gear through it, right? It's maybe like in sport when it's like you've got the ball in your hand and people are looking at you, right? And they're expecting you to kind of lead this, this play or whatever. And it's just at a totally different level versus even being, I was a chief commercial and marketing officer in my last job, top 5-6 employees at a $10 billion company. But in this role, people look to you and they say, this is on you. And that's as much of a mindset that you have to gear yourself through.
So let's talk about, because I think this is really interesting for new CEOs, because it is on you, but you also have a very experienced team, right? That you have experts around you.
Yeah.
So what is like in this world where the buck stops with you, what do you need and want out of your leadership team?
I want them to be, obviously, we need the best talent we can get. I want them to push back on me. If I was just to say, what's the most important thing for me? It's that my team tells me the truth, There's no varnishing. They tell me the bad news, and they push back if my ideas are not smart. There's lots of things, that I would want from the team, but that's the most important, because in absence of that, you can make mistakes, you don't see things, and so you need to create an environment where that dialogue, that debate, that pushback, that brutal honesty is the norm.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Geoff, because I think what you're talking about is your team is there to make you the best CEO you can be, right? So that's by giving you the best information, by challenging you. I think, and by making you the best CEO you can be, you're going to enhance the performance of the team.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's a really interesting piece, because people don't see often, or they don't perceive the CEO having the flow like that, which is, you have to help me be the best CEO I can be. They see the flow being the CEO is helping the team, but because of the responsibility that the CEO has, it can't work that way. I've never worked with a CEO where it has worked that way, but that is the social perception that the CEO has the answers, when actually the CEO almost never has the answers. The job's too big.
And as a CEO, like the way I'm wired, I'll have hypotheses, I'll have ideas, but like if my team or someone on my team, let's say, sugar-coated a bad result or didn't make me aware of something that's when you get into real trouble. If you've got a really good team, fundamentally solid business, and you're open, you're able to have open, honest dialogue, and I think you're halfway home. But that's not. I don't think that's a given. That I don't. So I don't feel I 100% inherited that leadership team, and so I've had to work at it. And I do think that's where some of the leadership principles you talk about in the book can help, because if your team trusts you as an individual, then they're probably more likely to have an open, honest dialogue with you. If they believe there's a safe space to push back, then obviously you're going to get more of that. But it's not. I don't think it's a given, and I think you have to work really hard at it.
Yeah. Well, I think the hierarchy makes it just the hierarchy makes it very difficult, right? And then culturally, there's, you've been in CPG a long time. You've come across spaces where the business hasn't been working and none of the leaders know, because no one wants to tell the truth, right? And so the hierarchy and the culture are the two things that make that hard. And so therefore you have to be intentional about how you break that down.
Right. And so just as a funny aside, so you and I were both at the launch of our new company, Identity, and we had this big event. Was last week?
It was a week ago, Geoff. It feels like.
And obviously I was, walking around the room talking to people, and someone came up to me and said, "Well, how do you think it's going?" And I said, "I'm not sure, because I think people will only tell me that it's going great." Right. But I joke about it, but that's a real.
It's a real
it's
thing.
A real thing.
Right?
It is a
real thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about just finish off by talking about what you're trying to do at Simply Good Foods. So, we talked about this idea. There's a new purpose. There's new values. You have a new ambition. I mean, this is a real, and this podcast is going to come out about a month after our conversation. Yeah. So you might have to do some future telling here, but what pushed you to have this, we'll talk about the ambition, and talk about how you got there as a leader, and then how you're trying to fulfill that ambition.
So the company that I'm CEO of is called Simply Good, and it's got two brands. One is Quest Nutrition Bars in Atkins. One, the Quest is in LA, Atkins is in Denver. And when I came to Simply, I found that it was really more like two companies, not one. And there was this sort of thirst for coming together as an organization. And obviously, I'm coming here with some bold ambitions. We're in the nutritional snacking category. It's got some incredible tailwinds, protein and snacking, health and wellness. So I've set this vision to be a much larger organization and to really lead that category. At the same time, these new weight loss drugs have come in to food, and they're offering consumers other options. And I look at that and say, what a wonderful time to reimagine a company at a time where hopefully American consumers, who to some extent I think have been let down by the industrial food complex. We have ridiculous levels of obesity and diabetes. And it is time for a change. And consumers need to be given control back. Part of that control being given back to them will be these weight loss drugs. I want to build a company that can play a leading role in that transformation and dislocation that's happening for good. We have the right products. We're in the right category. And I think I personally, and I think I speak for our employees, find it very motivating to look at what's going on in health and wellness and declare this moment as hopefully the moment when we give consumers back some control and we improve their health outcomes and their life outcomes. And how can we be part of that in a really meaningful way? And I was talking to our chairman, Jim Kiltz, so certainly a veteran of consumer products, and he said, Jim's done this longer than I have, and he said, what a wonderful opportunity to be at the center of this. And he's right. And that's how I want to frame it for our employees. Yes, you're coming to work to provide economic security for your families. And we got a chance to do something here that is doing a lot of good for a lot of people who need it.
That's great. And it definitely a very powerful aspiration. And I think you're right, it's motivating. But you've already done some things as for the organization to start on that journey. As you said, they weren't unified. Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit, like as a leader, how you see the journey of Simply Good happening over the next year or two?
Yeah, so if you, as we have, declared a pretty bold ambition, both on the business financial side and also on the more higher order purpose of changing health outcomes. Right. I felt in order to do that really well, that we would want to be very intentional about redefining our purpose in support of that, which we did with you, realigning our values in support of that, and then creating a new identity for the company, new visual identity. One that actually it's symbolized by, probably can't see it, but this symbol here, which is a heart and a lightning bolt, and bringing together two big ideas. One is doing good for people, which is the heart, and the lightning bolt is the innovation that we bring to everything we make in order to do that. So if you're going to set such a bold ambition, put that foundation and that scaffolding in place first, which is what we did last week. It unifies people, it provides clarity to the mission, and it provides an identity that people can really get behind in order, that can really get behind and is motivating. And last week was day one.
I think it's fascinating. It's going to be a fascinating story to follow, not just for Simply Good, but for the category, for health and wellness. There's obviously a great moment of dislocation, and the opportunity to step into that obviously is great. Well, Geoff Tanner, thank you so much for your time today. I think there's a few things that really struck out to me in our discussion. So one was this concept of authenticity and how important authenticity is to being a leader. The idea of being explicit with how you lead, and so helping your teams and the people that work with you understand how to work with you. And then this idea of intentionality. So whenever there's a change, being really intentional. So thanks to Geoff again. We've worked together for a long time, and I always learn things whenever we get a chance to chat. Just a reminder to everyone that the book is available on Amazon, and there's a link in the episodes notes. Episodes are now available on your favorite podcasting platform, so please like or leave a 5-star review, because that helps spread the word. So thank you, Geoff, and from Pete Steinberg, thanks you to all the listeners who've tuned in today.